Hey everyone, my name is Edudzi Adodo, and I'm the author of Children of Stardust. So I always loved science fiction books when I was growing up, and so it was always something that was in my mind. But I think the light bulb moment for me was watching Black Panther. It was just this story that blew me away, and I just loved the aesthetic. I love the world building, the characters, the story. And so that really put me in mind of really thinking of doing a science fiction book. I think at that point, I'd written 2 manuscripts, which I'd sent to literary agents, but they'd racked up more rejections than I think there are stars in the galaxy at that point. So I thought about doing a science fiction book. I think I got as far as sort of having some key elements. So I thought about this young hero who had a big dream and this mentor figure. So I think that was at that point. And fast forward a couple months and I got into a writer's workshop, which was held in Accra in Ghana. And that was an amazing experience. I learned a lot about the craft of writing. I learned also a lot about the publishing industry. And after one of the sessions, the wonderful lady who was holding the workshops took me to the side, and she was asking me a lot of questions about who I was, and she asked me if I was working on anything or had any new manuscripts I was working on. And so obviously I said yes. But bear in mind that I actually didn't have anything new, but I was just aware of the opportunity. And so the last day of the workshop, she called me again, and so we had a sit down. And so she told me a bit more about who she was, gave me a card, and she gave me the floor. And so I just remember having that panic-filled moment where I was sort of trying to figure out which story I'd pitch to her. Was I going to pitch one of the manuscripts that I'd already written and I knew very well? But then when I opened my mouth, essentially, the story that came out was this story of Zero, this young kid who grew up in the city of Children on this desertic island and who had this big dream of being a space adventurer, and who eventually joined the Space Adventure Guild and went on all these incredible adventures. So the story has evolved enormously since then, but that was the first time that I articulated a story that would then become Children of Stardust. And so fun fact, after I pitched that idea, that lady went on to become my agent, and the rights to the book were sold, and here we are with Children of Stardust, which is finally becoming a reality and is about to be published. So I think there's something to be said about Children of Stardust, and I think some stories you have sort of try and impose themselves on you and want to be born into the world, and I think that's what happened with Children of Stardust. So I grew up in Togo, a small country in West Africa, in a residential area called Akes. I was raised as an only child, which means that though I've heard about the concept of sharing, to this day, I've never quite put it into practice. I spent a lot of my childhood sort of figuring out how to occupy myself as an only child. I spent a lot of time sort of making up worlds in my head. And I think another particularity of me when I was a child was I used to tell a lot of fibs. I used to tell a lot of tall tales. And thinking back to it, I think part of it was because I was just bored with reality. And whenever I'd get bored with the way things were, I'd sort of invent new ways for things to be. And I'd just be convinced that they would be real. So I think there was also an aspect of me where I was very much a believer in the power of ideas and that I could somehow materialize the things I thought. So I think one case in point was my parents used to have these VCR tapes that contained hours of shows they'd recorded from American TV shows. So it was things like Popeye, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or Tom and Jerry. And so I'd watch these VCR tapes over and over again. And at some point I got bored. So I had this idea that I'd sort of get new shows. And so I remember taking the VCR cassette and a felt tip pen, and on the labels I wrote down all the shows I wanted to watch. And then I put it on the windowsill to dry. And I think I must have thought that somehow, the shows I wanted to watch would be downloaded, onto the VCR tapes. So obviously it didn't work. But it was sort of indicative of the way I thought as a child. I think apart from that, I was very much into video games and into anime. So I'd watch a lot of anime such as Dragon Ball Z, City Hunter, Saint Seiya. In terms of video games, I'd play anything from Sonic the Hedgehog to FIFA to Final Fantasy. And so I used to play so much that I think my parents were concerned about it. And I remember them at some point, threatening me and talking about, I had to stop because if I continued watching, I'd get square eyes. And so I think that scared me for 2 days straight. But then I thought about it and I told myself that if with all the TV shows I've watched and all the video games I've played, I still don't have square eyes, then chances are I'm gonna be all right. I think as cliche as it sounds, as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a writer. I was always writing, I was always inventing things. I think English literature was my favorite subject at school. And even though at different points in my life, I always had different things I wanted to do, I always knew that I'd come back to writing. I knew that writing would be the thing that would fulfill me. I think apart from that, another thing that told me I might be a writer was that anytime I watched a TV show or I'd read a book, it was never a passive activity for me. I was always sort of thinking about, the plot and, certain plot lines. So if the author chose to take the plot in this direction, I'd imagine, okay, what would happen if the plot went, in a completely different direction? I would sometimes see some characters that I enjoyed but had a small part to play in the story and imagine what would it be like if they had a bigger role in the story. Or I'd even imagine completely new characters and imagine them evolving in the story. So I was always trying to look under the bonnet and trying to change stories that I was reading. And so I think that sort of told me that maybe I'd be able to be a writer or to create eventually. And I think the third moment that told me that I might want to be a writer is playing this video game called Final Fantasy. And I just remember it being such an immersive experience and just being amazed by the story. And I told myself that one day I want to create, a story that was just as immersive and complex and interesting that people could sort of enjoy. So in terms of hobbies, I'd say I do a lot of reading now. So I spend a lot of time reading things, not just fiction, non-fiction, and a lot of anything I can find pretty much. Apart from that, I'm really passionate about football. I love watching football. I'm a big Liverpool supporter and playing basketball as well. So that's my favorite sport essentially. So I'm always playing basketball. And recently I've discovered boxing as well. So those are some of the things I do outside. I think that's a tough question. But if I could have a Cobra sticker, I think I'd go for 4 different Cobra stickers. I think the first one would be Jupiter, the Cobra sticker of the main hero Zero. I think everybody would want that Cobra sticker. It's a Origin series Cobra sticker, and everyone would want to be the 13th user or the 26th user because that would grant you immortality. So I think that would be the first Cobra sticker. The second Cobra sticker would be a Cobra sticker called Mapnix. And so that Cobra sticker, when you place it on you, helps you create a map which leads you to any object you own. And so it's sort of useful for people like me who lose a lot of things such as keys, books, or anything you own really. And then the third Cobra sticker would be linked to that, and it would be Récupère Nix, which is a irregular type Cobra sticker, which again helps you summon anything you own from anywhere. And so that would be incredibly useful. And I think the last Cobra sticker, and which might be my favorite of all time, is the Cobra sticker that's called Japo Japu Julu Jacko, Vuvu Vovo, No Nix, and that Cobra sticker is a legendary Cobra sticker, which sort of brings you happiness to anyone who's around the person wearing it. So I think that would be actually my favorite Cobra sticker. It wouldn't be very useful in duels though, because imagine having to repeat that name during a battle. But if I had to say which Cobra stickers were my favorite, I'd say those four. So I don't remember who said it, but I remember someone saying that talent is spread equally across the world, but opportunity isn't. And so I think with Children of Stardust, Zero sort of represents this idea of someone who has these big dreams and is in an environment which is not conducive maybe for him reaching those dreams, but he sort of perseveres through it and is able to achieve his dreams. And so it's just that belief that no matter your circumstance, no matter what your dream is, as long as you stay focused on it and you work hard at it, eventually you'll be able to get in an environment that is going to make you be able to succeed.